Oppo's newest smartphone looks to take the best of the past and bring it into the present. Hey, it's Joshua Regar from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And this is the Oppo Find 7 in this first look. As should be evidenced by the usage of the Find name, this is an update to the original Find 5 that was also a bit of a trailblazer in its own right, as it was one of the first phones to come with a 1080p resolution display. That tradition continues here on the Find 7, as it comes with an industry-first 1440p display, not called 2K by the company, but instead Quad HD. But before we get into the absolutely jaw-dropping screen, let's talk about the design. The design of the Find 7 follows heavily from the language originally started in the Find 5, which is a wonderfully constructed body with steel elements. In the Find 7, the first thing that was noticed was a much better balanced weight distribution, as while the Find 7 comes a little bit heavier than its predecessor, it feels much nimbler in the hand than we would have expected. The black slate front has the 5.5-inch screen with capacitive keys on the bottom, accompanied underneath by a very attractive LED notification light called the Skyline notification light. The shine goes from the very middle of the area and permeates in a curve throughout the bottom of the phone. The button layout takes on the power button on the left with the volume rockers on the right, another returning feature from the Find 5, and at first the uncommon layout does take a little getting used to. Coming around the back, you will notice that there are two different backs in this video, as the phone comes in two different versions. Called the Find 7A or Lite, there's a version that sports a 1080p FHD display instead and includes somewhat lowered specifications that will have a brushed backing that does feel quite nice but is a bit slippery to the touch. The version sporting the Quad HD display instead has a carbon fiber backing that definitely feels more secure in the hand and has an attractive textured pattern. Either version will make for a phone that looks absolutely great, even more so in the white version if that is your preference. Now, 5.5 inches isn't quite a common size for a phone screen, as phone manufacturers are starting to stretch the limits of 5-inch form factors with 5.1 and 5.2-inch offerings nowadays. And then you have the larger phablet space that can range from 5.7 to the 6.4. Instead, Oppo went for the middle route and thus has a phone that does have a 5.5-inch screen but has the general size of a Samsung Galaxy Note 3. The result is a phone that is right on the line of discomfort when using one-handed. It's nowhere near the discomfort of a full-size phablet, and its form factor, we believe, will gradually feel normal to most users. Though the sides are rather thin, the flatness allows for a good enough grip that things never get out of hand. The screen is one of the biggest stories here with its 2K or Quad HD resolution, coming in at 2560 by 1440 and has the highest pixel density of any device in the world currently at 534 pixels per inch, thus bringing the first display experience of its kind. You can go to AndroidAuthority.com and see our examples of the differences between this and 1080p resolution screens, which all lead to the same conclusion. The Find 7 is incredibly sharp. But while under a microscope it might be easier to see how much more packed the pixels are, to the general user's eye, it's a certainty thus that the viewing experience will be highly enjoyable. Oppo is really showing their display pedigree with the Find 7, and it was honestly one of the most photogenic screens I have had the pleasure to film and photograph. If you already have a great time with 1080p displays, then that will simply just continue here with Oppo's latest. But once again, remember to head to AndroidAuthority.com for an even closer look. Underneath the hood, we get different versions of the Find 7 once again, as the 1080p phone will come with the Snapdragon 800 and the Quad HD Performer will sport the Snapdragon 801 and 3GB of RAM. The Color OS, while not necessarily considered minimalistic in its feature set, actually flew by very smoothly in either version we tested, making this phone sit among its competition in terms of sheer performance. For the most part, the only thing really hindering our speedy experience on the Find 7 was having to hold down the home button to access the recent app screen. And in terms of hardware, Oppo wanted to step their game up even further by offering expandable storage underneath that removable back. And as far as connectivity goes, this is the first Oppo smartphone to handle LTE connections, as it will be made available in every market's version of the phone. That's a big deal for anyone otherwise sick of Oppo's HSDPA connectivity available on previous offerings. But the biggest story in hardware here is definitely in regards to the battery. 3000 mAh might sound pretty normal for the 1440p phone, but Oppo has built in a technology allowing for what is called multi-step constant current charging. Now that all sounds like technical talk, but here's the gist. Oppo claims that the phone can go from 0 to 75% battery life in half an hour. Bottom line is, you're looking at the best-in-class charging speeds of any smartphone. We're excited to put it to the test, but in the end, faster charging time is an exciting prospect indeed. Moving into the camera, we have a 13 megapixel optic package powered by the latest generation Sony Xperia RS sensor. The result is a photography experience that is greatly enhanced but still feels pretty familiar. The app is very much the same ColorOS app from the N1 that includes a lot of different options for your photography experience, including some surprises like the ability to shoot in RAW format, as well as a few returning features like a slow shutter capture. I turned on the touch to capture feature and found the app very snappy, getting its focus point very quickly and then going from shutter to file in very little time. And during our first glance, the pictures all looked quite nice, but our full review will really put it through its paces, so stay tuned for that. And finally, we'll talk about the software, as we have the ColorOS that returns from the Oppo N1. While we were told a new version of this operating system is definitely on its way, the ColorOS is already pretty feature-packed from the top down. On the home screens, there are the live media widgets for extra fun. Despite some interesting shape choices here and there, the general experience is what you would expect, especially with the ColorOS being one of the few Asian user interfaces that still uses an app drawer. Dive deeper into the experience, however, and you'll be sure to find plenty of little gems that range from gimmicky to incredibly useful. The useful features include the gesture panel that you can bring down by sliding from the left of the drop-down, and in there you can draw any number of programmable gestures to perform a bunch of
Ciao a tutti, sono Alessandro, vediamo qui di fronte a voi l'Xperia Z2, l'ultimo top di gamma della casa giapponese, con diverse novità. Abbiamo un display da 5.25 pollici Full HD, TFT come tecnologia, che supera i 400 ppi come densità di pixel. Abbiamo anche tutta una nuova interfaccia con nuove animazioni e nuovi menu. Come potete vedere, scorrendo a sinistra con lo slide del drawer, abbiamo tutta una nuova serie di scorciatoie, le più usate, Ordina, Play Store, Sony Select, la possibilità di disinstallare, eccetera. Abbiamo inoltre il nuovo Snapdragon 801 spinto a 2.3 GHz e abbiamo i soliti 2 GB di RAM. Abbiamo inoltre una fotocamera posteriore da ben 20.7 megapixel, assolutamente un sensore della stessa Sony, e un design che non si discosta troppo dallo Z1 precedente. Come potete vedere abbiamo linee leggermente più morbide sui lati con i bordi smussati. Presto dovrebbe arrivare anche in Italia ad un prezzo che dovrebbe aggirarsi dai 500 ai 699 euro. Per il resto abbiamo anche un nuovo dialer che si sposa molto da vicino con il dialer dell'Android 4.4. Abbiamo inoltre alcune applicazioni preinstallate come la radio FM, il track ID e tutta una serie di live log che ci permette di utilizzare anche il nuovo accessorio di Sony che vedremo